Oop. Oh. Mm. All right. Hello, everybody. Just waiting for a few more to join. All right. So hello, everyone, and thank you again for attending the ISMTE 2021 global event. My name is Adriana Borgia, and I'm a team manager in journals production at Elsevier, and I volunteer as a member of the ISMTE North America Conference Planning Committee. Please let us know in the chat where in the world you are joining us from. We're going to hold questions until after the presenters have finished, but feel free to submit your questions at any time during the presentation by using the Q&A field. Also, feel free to indicate which presenter that you are asking by typing in the @ before their name. And be sure to upvote any questions from other attendees that you find interesting. We will make every effort to answer as many questions as possible at the end of the speaker presentations. So before we get started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our generous sponsors, Scholastica, Adipon, the American Chemical Society, the American Gastroenterological Association, Cabell's International, CompuScript, and Scriptrendy. We have no conflicts of interest to declare for our speakers in relation to this session. So I'm very excited to introduce this afternoon's session, the emerging role of DEI editorial leadership in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion. In this session, we will discuss the role of editors in advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in academic journals. In the wake of growing awareness of health equity and anti-racism, many journals are now assessing opportunities for focused efforts to improve diversity and advance equity. However, there is no textbook per se for creating these roles. Presenters will discuss the functions, opportunities, and challenges of creating and supporting DEI editor positions to enable long-term impact and share perspectives on fostering these roles. Our first speaker is Dr. Chaik Daubeny. Dr. Daubeny is a practicing family doctor who is also trained in preventive medicine. He's dedicated his career to innovations in health promotion, clinical care delivery, research, and training generations of clinicians and scientists. Dr. Daubeny is a professor of family medicine at the Mayo Clinic College of Medicine and Science with a joint appointment in the Department of Internal Medicine. He serves as an enterprise leader for health equity at the Mayo Clinic and works to promote health justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion nationally. Dr. Daubeny is the inaugural director of the Center for Health Equity and Community Engagement Research at the Mayo Clinic. In addition, he directs community outreach and engagement for the Mayo Clinic. He is also the inaugural DEI editor of the journal Gastroenterology. Our second speaker is Dr. Ulka Sakdev. Dr. Sakdev is the Chief of Vascular Services at the Maggie Women's Hospital of UPMC. She also serves as the co-director of the UPMC Heart and Vascular Institute's Vein Center. Dr. Sakdev specializes in the treatment of venous as well as arterial disease and dialysis access. She is funded by the NIH to study inflammation and peripheral vascular disease and is developing a research program to evaluate similar pathways in chronic venous disease. Dr. Sakdev is the Assistant Program Director of the UPMC Training Program and has received teaching awards from both vascular residents and fellows and medical students. She is also the inaugural DEI editor of the Journal of Vascular Surgery. So I'm going to stop sharing. We're going to begin the session with two brief presentations from our speakers, followed by Q&A. Dr. Daubeny will begin with his presentation.
Great. Thanks, Adria, for the introduction. So I was privileged to serve as the inaugural DEI section editor, talk about directors, right? Section editor for Gastro, the Journal of Gastroenterology. So this slide here, I just want to underscore the fact that this is really a team effort in this work. And as Adria said, The scope and the nature of this work has been defined as we establish these positions, and gastro no exception. But there's some foundational things in gastro, I think, that began to help shape how this role was being defined. And one of those is the American Gastroenterological Association's project called the Equity Project, which essentially laid out a roadmap for health equity, addressing racism within the field. And that roadmap serves as sort of the guiding principles for these roles within the suite of journals that are owned or affiliated with AGA. And gastro, of course, is sort of the big journal within the group. And the AGA project or roadmap is called the Equity Project is the work, but it's actually titled more or less From Intention to Action. And that is a publication in one of the journals about the roadmap that AGA has created to help inform this work. And as part of that roadmap is the role of the DEI editor, which was approved by AGA back in 2020. And I assumed the role a number of months back this year. So what does the DEI editor of gastroenterology do? And why do we have the role? I think these are important, and I know, Olka, you go into some of the details of your role. And you know, it goes without saying that we know there are inequities in the inclusion of people of color or people who are underrepresented in a specialty in editorial roles in research. Number of publications in this area, of course, there's been a flurry of activities coming out of COVID and other really unfortunate circumstances over the past almost 2 years now. And so I think it's clear from what we have looked at within AGA and gastro that research reporting is frequently inadequate for evaluating and reporting data regarding the relevant areas of influence and disparities. But also the topics themselves are difficult to do. And I do some of this work in other areas and find this to be really true. But what is underscored here, as you can see from the third bullet there, is that in an analysis across all of the journals, only 2.6% of the editors and editorial board members were from underrepresented groups. So that's a very small number. I mean, even if you look at a population demographics from the census, you see that that number is really, really pitiful. And so it goes without saying this is really important for us to do. How can we do this, knowing that for journals, the role is basically about publishing papers. You know, you don't create research, you publish the papers. And so recognizing this challenge here, there was a need really to enhance innovation as part of creating this role, but also to help have the DEI editor be the lead to help expand the editorial content within the journal. And I think the innovation that can come from having a DEI editor, and this is said in many other areas around diversity and inclusion, is that they can help to address issues of assumptions that we're beginning to pay attention to because of, for instance, EGFR. It's a good example that these assumptions have stayed in part. You know, you can say, where is the data? But they stayed in part because we don't have a diverse group of people to raise those questions and challenge those assumptions that tend to stand for a long time. And from gastro perspective, we had to take an approach that's sort of what's the big picture, and then what are the specific areas of emphasis that need to occur in the short term, and then ultimately in the long term. And I will, offer to you that in these roles, it's important to have a value statement associated with it. And what you see there is sort of that value statement, which is that the journal itself envisions a scientific publishing enterprise that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. And I think having that sort of value umbrella helps to anchor how these roles can be supported in the process. And this can be done through direct action, such as having the a section editor in place, or things that Gastro, for instance, will do, but also through partnerships with other journals and other organizations. And within AGA, benefit is that within the Gastro is under AGA. So that also then gives to the platform through which some of these activities can be channeled or directed. And so Gastro has committed to develop and implement processes and practices to help address the barriers that create this underrepresentation within the editorial membership of the journal. So with this role created, you see this picture, nice picture that was promoted through social media, highlighting the role that was created in Gastro. And the DEI editor obviously has to work with the editors-in-chief, and that's the structure that we created, and also with the board of editors of Gastro, because the DEI editor is in the meetings and can also listen to themes that can then be used to create a content within the journal. And some of the initiatives that have been initiated here include a monthly column that will highlight our future content on DEI in research, publishing, and healthcare. The other area is addressing the use of race and in research and publications. And obviously, this is an area of emphasis recently in many journals, including Gastro. And that's really an important role for the DEI editor to play. And also, the editor will also, do serve as reviewer. And when it's relevant, the topic is relevant, sometimes also see opportunities to do an additional editorial, for instance. It's also one of the ways that we have used the role in Gastro. All right, so these are some things that we've done already. The attention to race, ethnicity, and gender diversity of incoming board of editors is one area. We've started a role, so with a new team coming on board, obviously this is an important part of it. The SEGA guidelines have been implemented. Obviously, Elsevier, as a parent of the journal, also plays a role in this. And we have created the curator section, Equity in GI, that will be an online collection on health disparities and diversity and other related topics in this area. We've also added DEI keywords for authors to select upon manuscript submission. There is sort of a box that allows them to do that. And then another initiative that is started is the selected summaries of high-profile DEI articles from other journals that are also included in the selected summary section of Gastro to help highlight that. One that I am particularly proud of is the implementation of AMA Manual of Style Guidelines. A scientific editor has the same sort of approach, so this is not in discord with anything else, but it's in terms of how race is, inclusive language is used, is an important initiative because it's all over the map in terms of how authors use it. So, for the editorial managers, this is one that obviously will take perhaps some adjustment, but if not something that you're doing already, to catch these language issues that could be seen as stigmatizing in some ways. So some of the in-progress initiatives include developing new commentary series on DEI. Thanks to Erin and Jillian for working with me on this, and the editors working with me on this, and benchmarking demographic data for reviewers and authors, because getting this baseline is important, yet very difficult to capture. And so this is an area of work already. We're also working with some partners such as the Association of Black Gastroenterologists and Hepatologists to try to see ways that we can partner and collaborate to do this work. There's diversity statement underway. It's been reviewed and likely going to go, to press with it very soon. And we have we now have on the books an implicit bias workshop related to science and publishing for the editors and board of editors of gastroenterology. That's, I think, is an interesting initiative. Other things include name change. If you change your name, how do you change it in the journal? targets for authors, editorialists, and others. And one that we're looking at, and there's a lot of interest in this, is can we create fellowships, editorial fellowships for folks who are from underrepresented backgrounds, as a way to understand editorial workings and how they can then use that as a way to gain experience and gain leadership in the editorial area. And I think that's going to be important to think through. And so I'd love to hear what Alka, your experience has been in doing this. So thank you so much, and I'll hand it off to you.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Dabeni. Alka, you're up.
Thanks so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to speak about this today. So just as an overview of this talk, I'll discuss a little bit about the call to action that ended up impacting our journal that moved this initiative forward, how we expanded participants in the process of the reviewer pool, as well as the editorial board and editorial leadership for our journal, which is the Journal of Vascular Surgery, presented a JVS-specific DEI supplement, which I think was quite impactful, instituted editorials focused on DEI-related issues, and then made some changes to our instructions to both the authors and the reviewers regarding potential bias. And then I'll end with our institution of a similar type of program that Chaik was just describing, which was an internship that trains the next generation of reviewers and hopefully the editorial board. So, of course, as in many things, these institution of a DEI officer or a focus on diversity-related initiatives comes about as a response to a public event. And that was kind of the case in the Journal of Vascular Surgery. Many within our field of the Society for Vascular Surgery had been advocating for diversifying the field in different ways in general. But the impetus to do so was really publicly sparked in the summer of 2020, when a paper was published in our journal on the use of social media by graduating trainees, which was a relatively subjective assessment that appeared to be based on very ossified norms of what it means to be a professional. And as a result, a very vocal and very public outcry that was in the media came out. The paper ended up needing to be retracted. And this, of course, brought very unnecessary and unwanted attention, and negative attention on our field, where I believe the vast majority of us are just trying to do the right thing. And as a result of this event, a call had gone out to institute a new editorial position with a focus on diversity, equity, inclusion. And because I was already on the editorial board in another fashion for another sister journal off of this one, I had applied for the position and ultimately got it. I will say that part of what sparked the public outcry was the times that we were in. There had been two other very similar papers that had come out in different journals, also surgical subspecialties that didn't really make a peep. But I think the influence of the Me Too movement, of Black Lives Matter movement, I Look Like a Surgeon was another kind of Twitter phenomenon that was going on at the time, as well as White Coats for Black Lives. This all kind of sparked the creation of this initiative for our journal. So why is this important? Well, certainly in surgery, it's extremely important. The scope of the surgical workforce problem has just been actually readdressed by the AAMC, and that's not what these numbers are from. The most recent one, actually, I want to say just came out yesterday, but clearly the representation of women in higher ranks of academic leadership are decline over the course of a career trajectory for women. Women are 51% of physicians at the instructor and 43% at the assistant level, but only 32 and 19% progress to associate and full professors, respectively. In surgery and the surgical subspecialties, the percent of women who are full professors is less than 10%. Black or African American, Native American, Hispanic, and Asian women are 5% of professors. And the fact is, disparities in rank equal disparities in earning potential, and involvement in editorial leadership and in journals really play a role in getting your name out there and being someone who actually would be eligible to advance through the academic ranks of an institution. The other reason why this is so important, and I'm sure many other sessions from today have kind of highlighted this, is I think stated here by this editorial that was published in Cell not too long ago by editorials of major scientific journals, that science has a racism problem. And this is exemplified in the historic use of eugenics, exploitation of Black research subjects such as Henrietta Lacks' Tuskegee syphilis study, many of which we are all very familiar with, significant disparities based on race in morbidity and mortality of a number of different medical conditions, and the relative silence of the scientific community for years against racial injustice. And I think we are seeing a sea change at how the scientific community responds to some of these issues at this current time. So here's the overview of the JVS changes that were instituted. We had a significant expansion of the reviewer pool and an editorial board. We published a JVS DEI supplement, which I will show you. We instituted this JVS internship, and we had an addition to author and reviewer instructions. So let's talk first about the expansion of the reviewer pool and the editorial board. As I mentioned, there was the naming of the associate editor for Journal of Vascular Surgery with a focus on DEI, and that is the position that I currently hold. We had a very targeted recruitment of women and underrepresented in medicine folks to the editorial leadership in other roles within the JVS. So like I mentioned, there are these sister journals, so to speak. There is the JVS Cases, Innovations, and Techniques. We named someone, there's the JVS CIT, the JVS Vascular Science, and a new editorial role for review articles. And each one of these were new roles were filled by either someone who is from a community that is traditionally underrepresented in medicine, or by a woman, or both. And as of January 2021, there was a 27% increase in the underrepresented in medicine and women in the editorial board and a reviewer pool. So not perfect, but certainly on its way to very significant improvement. The JVS DEI supplement came out as through the work of the Society for Vascular Surgery Diversity Task Force that basically this is a supplement of invited research papers that are looking at a broad topic of broad range of topics on diversity, including, for example, letters of recommendation in the surgical application process, and whether that is something we really should be doing anymore or not. So this was, I think, a marked improvement, and something that came about as the result of a diversity focus for our journal. The internship is something that is very new, and is something that I spearheaded with others in the leadership for the journal. The goals of the program are to teach the next generation of vascular surgeons how to be good reviewers of clinical and basic scientific research, and to diversify the reviewer pool to better reflect the communities that we serve, both academically as well as our patients. The interns are mentored by senior editorial and reviewer staff throughout the process, and are expected to review a select number of papers to produce at least one co-authored commentary during the course of their time. We had about 40 applicants for this, so there was a huge interest. And the reviewers of those applications included myself, someone else from the editorial team for the JVS, as well as members of the DEI committee for the Society for Vascular Surgery. We based our decisions off of the personal statement, letters of recommendation, and expressed interest in understanding the review and publishing process. Some stated commitment to DEI issues and how to improve diversity within the pool and within research. And people who had time to do this program, ideally, you know, a little bit more senior within their training so that they have some understanding of the literature. They have a number of responsibilities, including to produce at least 10 reviews per year, as well as a commentary. They fill out a pre and a post assessment so we can kind of track how well we did in getting them to their goals. They have to provide timely reviews. They familiarize themselves with the JVS content, and they watch a number of videos on diversity, equity, inclusion, and how to include it in research that are present on the Elsevier website. They meet with the mentors, and they attend a number of lectures. The curriculum that we're providing is shown here, and includes a number of different things, like what is the journal process? What happens to a paper the minute it hits the door? You know, how does it get assigned to an editor? How does the editor decide who the reviewers are? So we learn about that. We teach about implicit bias in writing and editing, about digital platforms in the dissemination of surgical science, including social media. What is open access? What are the criteria to write a great paper? How to talk about an high impact journal, and what does that mean? So a number of different things that we suspect are really going to help them understand the publishing process. And so right now that program is underway. I think it's so far been quite successful, but it's still very new. And hopefully in the years to come, we'll have more to say about that. So the other thing that we talked about in my new role was how to modify what the instructions to authors and reviewers are, so that the content that we're putting in our journal is getting the best critique and is most able to kind of address different issues associated with the diverse population that our patients often come from. And so one of these, you know, at the end of a review, typically for the Journal of Vascular Surgery, we have this checkbox that we have to check off. Did we format our comments correctly? So what we had kind of come up with was, well, can we also include in this reviewer box, you know, a box to check off about how well the paper addressed potential issues regarding to diversity clinically. To kind of get some more information about that, I tapped the Elsevier Research Academy, which is such an incredible source to ways in which we could better integrate sex, gender, and intersectional analysis into our research. This was a particular talk that I took these particular slides from. This includes the new sex and gender equity in research guidelines, of which I'm not going to get too much into now, but certainly they're out there and we will be incorporating them for our journal. But also understanding that it is more than sex and gender, and we need to have some understanding of intersectionality as well. So this brought us, when we were talking about how to incorporate these guidelines for both the authors and for the reviewers, is what is our obligation on reporting potential social determinants of health in the Journal of Vascular Surgery, and how the research that's presented there impacts those social determinants of health. We want to encourage our authors to consider how research might affect communities affected by social determinants, but not be so rigid that we force authors to become disparities researchers, because not all of them are. And the caveat is, at least in vascular surgeries, there's many aspects of what we do in vascular surgery that do highlight societal disparities. So this is still a work in progress. We certainly are going to be asking our authors that they are following the sex and gender equity and research guidelines. And if not, was some reasoning given. This is both for the authors and for the reviewers. These are ways that those guidelines can be incorporated to different aspects of the publication. But we also are going to be asking our authors, or asking our reviewers, whether the authors consider the impact of relevant social determinants of health, as well as demographic factors in the development of their study design and or interpretation of their study findings. And such points may include, but are not limited to, the following social determinants that are listed below. And I think this is the compromise we've come up with. And this is something that we're going to, again, be asking our authors to be addressing, as well as the reviewers and the editors when decisions are being made, whether to accept or not to accept that paper. So I really want to thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Sochdave. It's been great to see what you've been able to accomplish in just, I guess, within a year's time. It's a lot of good progress.
Thanks.
So we're moving on to Q&A. We actually have a few questions already, which is great.
Mhm.
So I'll start off with a few of these. Since Dr. Sochdave, since you were just speaking about this,
Mhm.
so we have a question. Are the intern training modules all created by Elsevier, JVS, or a combination of both?
That's a great question. They were actually created by myself and the editors of the JVS because, and a lot of them were based off of talks that have been given for the Society for Vascular Surgery. So, like, we have a vascular annual meeting, and at that vascular annual meeting, the JVS usually has a representative block of time to talk about the journal. And a lot of these came from those talks. Some of them are talks that I kind of came up with on my own, and some of them were on the Elsevier site. So, you know, I tapped in, I think all of us kind of tapped into what's already kind of been out there and what's been published about this already, so that we're not trying to reinvent the wheel. Although I do have to say, in this role, it does feel a little bit like reinventing the wheel because it's not like there's a textbook out there that tells us how to do this job.
Yeah.
So that sometimes becomes kind of challenging.
Mhm. Oh, thank you. Let's see. And I have here we go, a question for Dr. Dalbeni.
Mhm.
So both the JVS internship program and the planned AGA fellowship program seem like fantastic initiatives. Dr. Dalbeni, can you share more about the fellowship program plans and aims?
No, I wish I could tell you specifics about what we'll do. So, for full disclosure, we are in the process of writing a commentary around this because I think that allowed the board of editors and the editors in chief to think through what are the various ways we can conceptualize. I think I see another question about sort of overwhelming thoughts around how we're going to handle this. And part of handling that is to undergo the process of conceptualizing the role. What does the role do, and what are the metrics that we're going to measure? And clearly, the board of editors was interested in looking at pathway programs similar to the internship program that Olka described that we can use. And Gastro has a similar program, and so we have to think through what that structure will look like. How do you do a program that's focused specifically on people who are underrepresented? And I think the other thing to, at least I had to think through, is there's also the concept of minority tax, right? So when we say we want to now increase the pool of reviewers in the journal who are from diverse or racial and ethnic minority background, is that a good or a bad thing, right? And I think that is, to me, is not quite clear. And so editorial roles are not necessarily a walk in the park, right? And so they need to understand what the process, how do you select reviewers and all of that. So I think it's going to be important. I have a strong sense that we'll go forward with this initiative, but this is currently a concept as opposed to something with a solid plan behind it. If you're asking me how I will do it, I will set up a specific program around a fellowship for people from racial and ethnic minority background for them to apply to through the institutions, academic institutions, give them an opportunity like a year or so to be involved in the editorial decision-making process, learn how to select reviewers, review papers, listen to discussion, present their reviews or the assessment of reviews at the editorial board. But I do think there's one piece that's important, okay, in all of this. Part of that is, and it's all excited, so it's Adri, but I think you said it actually, is that it actually gives them visibility, right? But also the opportunity to network, because with that networking, you now have the ability, if you're interested, to gain that skill set needed to be an editorial leader, such as an editor-in-chief or some other role.
Yeah, definitely. I think that goes to a question that I've had as well. Is that and it's this could be for both of you. Is how do we determine exactly uh, how do we determine what success looks like for each journal when we're implementing initiatives like these?
I mean, I can. Oh, you want to go first, Olka? Yeah, I mean, I have a friend and colleague at NYU who is, some of you may have seen it, the paper I wrote about JAMA diversity in the JAMA editorial team across all of his journals. And I think until you look at the numbers, it's often difficult to understand and it's easy to dismiss. Um, and the temptation is to say that success means that we have an editorial board or team that is proportional to the representation in population. But after all, as Olka said and showed, there's like a continuous drop off, right? As to go from matriculation to actually becoming a leader in academic medicine, getting funded research in the area that would lead you to editorial positions. I mean, if I were to look at it, I will at least look at the proportion in the specialty, right? Are they represented proportionally in the specialty? Because at that point in time, there's no reason to think why that group should not be represented in that reasonable way. But ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, we want to be at a place where you have enough diversity on the team to help drive innovation, challenge some of the things that we do and take for granted and do because the way we've always done things. But also give them the ability to grow within those roles. So I would say that we should have, and I don't know what a number is, a good number of people who are editors-in-chief of these journals, not just serving as associate editors or other things. But I think that should be the goal, to have a reasonable number of people as editors-in-chief.
Yeah, I would echo that. I mean, I would say that it is so hard because I think the success can come in so many different ways. But to echo what you just said, Chaik, that I would say success to me is that there would be diversity in the editorial leadership in terms of race and gender and sexual orientation. But those people are not always talking about diversity. It's like, it does become like, oh my gosh, if one more person asks me about diversity, I'm like, I can talk about science too. I can talk about, treatment of abdominal aortic aneurysm. Like, I can do that also. And in fact, I have one of the vascular surgeons who I end up working with a lot, just kind of remotely on different projects, who I think she and I are going to team up and write an editorial about this exact thing. About ideally, you want to have a broad representation in your editorial board and your reviewer pool but those people are, underrepresented in medicine, are not just talking about being underrepresented in medicine. They're talking about other things too.
Mm-hmm. No. Okay.
And I actually would offer that if all they are doing is talking about DEI, we have a problem. And I think the temptation is that we have those people, the people of color and women addressing those issues, and then the sort of scientific other things addressed by other people. Right? And I think that's really important. And that's sort of the minority tax thing, right? So then you only go to them for reviews of diversity issues. Yes, that may be needed when the expertise is not as broad, but it's really important for us to watch out for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really important point. So a few more questions from the audience. Here's another one. Yeah, so there are many things journals can do around DEI, which can be overwhelming for staffs that already feel that they are at capacity. What is one thing journals can do to make an impact?
That's a really good question. I mean, and I do feel like the whole world at the moment feels like they're doing more with less, and it's just everyone's feeling a little burnt out, and it is overwhelming to have to deal with some of these issues. I would say that I like the idea of putting some of this onus on the authors who are going to be publishing in the journal, to kind of force accountability in this space. And so that's sometimes, that's why that checklist, that checkbox is kind of important for the authors and for the reviewers to at least say that it was done. And having a statement that the journal kind of adheres to. But if you're going to put a statement out, you do have to adhere to it. Like, it can't be just lip service. But I think kind of solidifying that and making it visible, making it something the authors know they're going to have to adhere to and something the reviewers know they have to adhere to, is a really good first step.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure that I can pick out one. I was looking at the question and reflecting on it, one specific thing that can be done to make a transformative change. And I think the question about benchmarking was also there. So once you've collected the data, what do you do with it?
Yes.
I actually think that may be the one important thing, because without data, we can't really guide what we're doing. I was in a webinar earlier today, and someone from England said just as much, that you have to know where we're starting from. And I think it's really important as a starting point. And I'll give the credit to Erin and Jillian and Brooke and others who have led this for gastroenterology, and Doug and Rick. We have to try and collect the data and collect it prospectively. Who is submitting to the journal? What type of articles are you publishing? Because without that, we wouldn't really know. But I do think, and this is probably a pet peeve of mine, and so please forgive me. I do think that the one thing that we need to begin to do differently is two things. One is inclusive language in the papers that are published. I think paying attention to that, and literally, because that's at the point where the papers, like, I know the competition of who gets papers, high impact papers, you don't want to scare people away. Getting authors to begin to understand that this is how it should be phrased, right? Will begin to change that culture. The second thing that is really important, in my view, and this is where journal managers can make a huge difference. One of the biggest challenges we have in this nation is that we have an evidence base that is very, very deficient when it comes to people who have a higher burden of disease or conditions, you can name it, but tend to be underrepresented in studies. And we have this classification called other races, right? I do it all the time too. I think the AMA Manual of Style is taking a position that maybe that's not okay. We should call them out and put zeros on them. Because when we begin to look at, is the evidence inclusive of all groups? We won't know if all we do is put other than blankets. And so I think those are, and I'm not sure. I think change is difficult, right? Change is hard for all of us to do. We get into a routine. I say to myself that most of what I do is automated. I can get up in the morning and now you have to learn how to ride that new bike with I don't know, 4 wheels or 10 wheels. But I think once you start doing it, it becomes second nature to us. And I'm pretty certain that it becomes routinized. But I do think that those two things are going to be important if we're going to begin to change that. We have a paper coming out from the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, and we did put a quote from Desmond Tutu about how language helps begin to define the reality. And I think once we start calling people stigmatizing things, that's the way we relate to them, right? And using person first, using gender neutral language, that begins to help us understand that there are other people out there who need to be considered when we're doing this. When we're doing race-involved algorithms, that probably doesn't come to the managers, we tend to just take these things and just run with them because it's so busy. Anyway, that's more than one, but I do think that these are two things that we have to pay attention to.
Definitely agreed. And I think that gets us to time. So we're right on the half-hour mark. So I just wanted to say thank you, everyone, so much for attending the session, and definitely to our presenters, Dr. Dalbeni and Dr. Sokdev. You've given us a lot to think about. I'm sure there's still a lot of questions that are on people's minds. So again, please feel free to reach out. More than happy to answer any questions after the session. And so once again, we would love to stay connected with you. If you're on social media, please use our hashtag ISMTE Global to find and share content. And be sure to stop by the Exchange Forum right after this session. I hope you all have a great afternoon or evening. We look forward to seeing you again, and take care. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.